The wind always sounded different across my land. Before the noise, before the concrete, before the strangers came with their blueprints and bulldozers, it used to whisper. My father said the sound of wind over dry grass tells you if the earth still remembers your name. 4 generations, the ground behind Miller's Creek remembered ours, the hollows. 87 acres of wild stretch, bounded by cedar trees and an old river bend that glistened like polished glass when the sun hit it right. I hadn't been back there for almost 10 years. Life had pulled me away, college, jobs, a broken marriage, and a city that didn't care whether I slept or not. The land was supposed to stay quiet while I rebuilt my life. But when I came back one morning, there was nothing quiet left. From the top of the hill, I saw houses. Rows of them. Dozens, fresh paint glinting in the light, roofs lined like soldiers. Streets carved where deer trails used to run. And a giant wooden sign at the entrance. Welcome to Cedar Valley Estates, a proud HOA community. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. But when I saw the fence, their fence, cutting straight through what used to be my pasture, my chest went cold. I parked my truck by the dirt road and walked toward the new subdivision. There was the smell of asphalt and cut lumber, the steady beep of a loader backing up. A man in a hard hat waved, assuming I was one of them. "Morning. You here for the inspection?" he asked. "Something like that," I said quietly, stepping onto what used to be my soil. He pointed toward the center of the site. "We're almost wrapped up. 96 homes total. HOA's gonna be thrilled. Model units sold out in weeks. 96 homes. On my land." I didn't shout. I didn't even argue. I just stood there, watching walls rise where I used to chase my father's old dog, watching people hammer dreams into stolen ground. Every blow of the nail gun felt like it echoed inside my ribs. That night, I drove back to my father's house, or what was left of it. He'd passed 3 years ago, but his study was still filled with boxes and old ledgers. And there it was, the original deed, yellowed, folded neatly in a sealed envelope. His handwriting scrawled across the front. "For Michael. Never forget what's yours." I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. My name. My land. Not a lease. Not a joint claim. Absolute ownership. The next morning, I called the county office. "I'd like to confirm ownership records for parcel 51B along Miller's Creek." The clerk's tone was polite at first. "Hold please." A few minutes later, she came back. "According to our system, that parcel belongs to Cedar Valley Development Group. Acquired through Municipal Transfer Authorization, 2016. Municipal transfer. I repeated. I never sold it. "Sir, if you'd like to dispute ownership, you can file a claim with the county." The line went silent for a long moment. Then she added quietly, "You're not the first one calling about them." That night, I sat alone in my truck overlooking the valley, watching headlights flicker through the new streets below. Families moving into their homes. Kids riding bikes over the land my grandfather plowed by hand. I could have stopped them right then. Called the police. Raised hell. But instead, I waited. I watched. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from stopping someone, it comes from letting them finish what they started. So I let them build. For months, the noise grew louder. Every weekend I'd drive by, pretending to be just another curious neighbor. I'd smile at the workers, wave at the supervisors, even chat with one of the engineers about the HOA's vision. He told me how they planned to create a tight-knit community with shared responsibility and pride. I bit my tongue not to laugh. Every nail, every roof tile, every sprinkler line they laid was technically on my property. I documented everything: photos, timestamps, drone shots, coordinates from county GIS maps. I built a record so tight no one could wiggle out of it. By late autumn, the subdivision was complete. 96 homes. Driveways, fences, mailboxes, all sitting on land that legally still belonged to me. They didn't know. The developers thought they'd cleaned up the paperwork, buried any trail of the hollow name under a web of fake signatures and clerical adjustments. They were wrong. When the first homeowners moved in, I stood on the hill and watched as they planted flags and kids ran across lawns that weren't theirs. A dull ache pressed behind my eyes, not anger, just an old sadness. My father had warned me about men like them. They take until you remind them what belongs to who. That winter, I did exactly that. I filed a quiet title action in county court, backed by every document, photo, and original notarized record from the 1980s. The clerk looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You're saying the HOA built all this on your land?" "I'm not saying it," I replied. "I'm proving it." A few weeks later, the summons hit their mailboxes. Developers, HOA board members, city council, every name tied to Cedar Valley Estates. They called. They emailed. They begged to meet. I ignored them all. Because I wanted them to feel what I'd felt, the disbelief, the helplessness, the weight of someone else's arrogance crushing your history. And when the court date came, I walked into that courtroom not as a victim, but as the owner. As I sat there, I remembered the first time I'd stood on that land as a boy, barefoot, holding my father's calloused hand. He'd said, "One day, they'll come for this, son. The only question is, will you still know what's yours when they do?" Now I did. And soon, everyone else would too. The courthouse smelled like dust and coffee. You could almost feel the history in its walls, thousands of arguments, lies, truths, and verdicts echoing through the wooden halls. As I walked in that morning, clutching my leather folder, the sunlight through the stained windows painted streaks of gold across the floor. My boots echoed in the silence. I wasn't nervous. I was patient. The case was listed as Hollow vs. Cedar Valley Development and HOA Board. To everyone else in the waiting room, I was just another man with a grudge. To me, I was there to reclaim what my blood and sweat had paid for generations ago. The HOA's lawyers were easy to spot: tailored suits, shining shoes, and expressions that said they'd never been told no. They whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing my way with the kind of smirk you give someone you think you've already beaten. One of them walked up. "Mr. Harlow, I presume," he said, extending a manicured hand. I looked at it but didn't take it. "Depends who's asking," I replied. "Bradley Carter, lead counsel for Cedar Valley. I just wanted to say, there's still time to settle this privately. We understand there's been confusion about boundary lines and record transfers." "Confusion," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call 96 houses built on another man's land?" He chuckled lightly. "These things happen, Mr. Harlow. The city approved everything. You'd be better off accepting a compensation offer than chasing an impossible reversal." I leaned closer. "Bradley, you ever see what happens when a man builds his castle on sand?" He blinked. "Excuse me." I smiled. "Eventually, the tide comes in." Inside the courtroom, the judge, an older man with steel-gray hair and a voice that carried authority, called for opening statements. My attorney, a local named Rachel Dunn, rose from her seat. She wasn't flashy, but she was sharp as a blade. "Your Honor," she began, "my client's family has owned this parcel of land since 1947. The defense claims to have acquired it in 2016 through a municipal transfer. However, there is no valid deed of sale, no recorded consent, and no payment made to the rightful owner. The evidence will show that Cedar Valley Development constructed an entire neighborhood on property that never legally belonged to them." The defense attorney, Bradley, stood next. His voice was smooth, practiced. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this is an unfortunate misunderstanding. The property in question underwent reclassification after a clerical oversight. The development was approved through proper channels. The plaintiff's claim, while emotionally compelling, lacks standing under the updated Municipal Zoning Act." I sat there, watching him spin fiction with confidence. But paper doesn't lie. Rachel placed the original deed on the evidence table. The judge adjusted his glasses and studied it for a long time. "This is authentic," he murmured. "Hand-signed, sealed, and notarized by the county clerk in 1984. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, even if that's true, ownership records were later updated digitally. The judge cut him off. Updated records don't erase original ownership unless a valid transfer occurred. Can you produce one? Silence. The air in the courtroom thickened. The HOA representatives whispered in panic. I could almost hear the weight of realization drop on them. They had built a multi-million-dollar community on land that didn't belong to them. Over the next hour, we laid out everything: drone images, property maps, tax receipts, and an affidavit from the county archivist confirming no authorized sale ever took place. The judge listened intently, occasionally tapping his pen against the bench. By midday, Bradley requested a recess. We need to confer with our clients, he said, trying to sound calm. The judge granted 20 minutes. Outside the courtroom, he approached me again, this time without the smugness. Mr. Harlow, he said quietly, let's be reasonable. We can offer you a significant settlement, 7 figures. You could walk away from this today. I studied his face. You think this is about money? He hesitated. Isn't everything? I shook my head. Not this. My father died thinking this land would always carry our name. You turned it into driveways and lawns. I'm not selling it back, I'm taking it back. When we returned, Rachel presented one final document, an aerial overlay showing every structure built on the disputed land. 96 homes, a clubhouse, a pool, a park. All within my parcel's legal boundary. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers. Then the judge spoke. Mr. Carter, until your clients can produce valid transfer documentation, I am inclined to issue a preliminary injunction restricting further transactions or modifications within Cedar Valley Estates. Furthermore, I'm ordering a temporary suspension of all HOA operations pending full ownership clarification. You could have heard a pin drop. The HOA board members looked stunned, some pale, others furious. Bradley muttered something under his breath. When the gavel came down, I exhaled for the first time that day. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Somehow, the story had leaked. Local man claims HOA built entire neighborhood on his land. Cameras flashed as I stepped down the courthouse steps. One of them shouted, Mr. Harlow, what's your next move? I smiled slightly. Same as it's always been, I said. Protect what's mine. That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Emails flew. Homeowners panicked. Some threatened to sue the developers, others demanded answers. Inside their neat, uniform houses, the cracks were starting to show, not in the walls, but in their certainty. And I watched it all unfold quietly, from the same hill where it began. The truth was out now, and truth is the one thing you can't pave over. But what they didn't know yet, what they couldn't imagine, was that I wasn't done. The injunction was just the beginning. The real reckoning was still coming. Because I hadn't pulled the deed out yet. Not completely. I was saving that for the day the judge said the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. The land belongs to Michael Harlow. By the time winter broke into early spring, Cedar Valley was cracking from the inside out. News vans lined the subdivision entrance every morning. Reporters camped beside the Welcome to Cedar Valley Estates sign, asking bewildered homeowners how it felt to live on land that might not be theirs. Some refused to talk. Others lashed out. But a few, mostly young families, just stared at the ground, silent, like they were waiting for someone to wake them from a bad dream. The developers had gone quiet. Their website vanished overnight, their offices locked and dark. And the HOA board, once proud and loud, was suddenly temporarily dissolved pending legal clarification. I almost felt sorry for them, almost. I still drove past every few days, notebook in hand, recording every new change. Empty homes now sat with for sale signs, though no one dared to buy. Real estate listings marked the lots as under legal dispute. Banks froze the mortgages. Contractors refused to return for maintenance. Cedar Valley was dying from the roots up, and all I had done was show them the truth. But the fight wasn't over. The court had only issued an injunction, the final ruling hadn't come yet. And that's when they tried their next move. It started with a visit. 2 black SUVs rolled up my dirt driveway one evening, tires crunching the gravel. Out stepped 3 men in dark coats, corporate, polished, and utterly out of place in the country. The lead man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Mr. Harlow," he said smoothly, "my name's Donovan Pierce. I represent certain investors affiliated with Cedar Valley Development. We'd like to make a proposal." I leaned against my truck. "Go ahead." He opened a folder. Inside was a check, blank, unsigned, but with the amount field already filled, $12 million. $12 million. Enough to buy every acre 3 times over. "You drop the claim," Donovan said, "sign over the land, and we settle this quietly. No more court. No more headlines. You walk away a rich man." I stared at the paper. For a moment, I saw my father's face in the back of my mind, mud on his boots, calluses on his hands, and the faint smell of tobacco and rain. He'd once told me, "Son, land's the only thing that doesn't lie. It's the only truth a man can stand on." I pushed the folder back toward Donovan. "You can't buy truth," I said. He frowned. "You understand the risk you're taking? If this case goes south, you'll lose everything. You'll spend years in appeals while we tie you up in paperwork. Men like me don't lose, Mr. Harlow." I smiled thinly. "You're right," I said. "Men like you don't lose, until someone like me stops playing your game." He left without shaking my hand. And for the first time, I could see it in his face: fear. The next few weeks were chaos. Cedar Valley's residents began turning on one another. Homeowners accused the HOA of fraud. The HOA blamed the city. The city blamed the developers. Lawsuits multiplied. Every news station within 50 miles carried the story. Homeowners discover their dream houses built on stolen land. The Harlow claim: could a legal oversight cost millions? The HOA scandal shaking Cedar Valley. People started calling me the man who outsmarted the HOA. I wasn't proud of that name. This wasn't about outsmarting anyone, it was about justice. Still, the attention drew out new allies. A retired surveyor contacted my lawyer, confirming that the county's GIS data had been manually altered 6 years ago. A whistleblower from the development firm came forward, revealing that signatures on the supposed transfer authorization were forgeries, names copied from old zoning applications. Each revelation was a stone dropped in still water, and the ripples were destroying everything the HOA had built. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A certified letter from the court. Final hearing scheduled, April 12th. That night, I walked back to the hill overlooking the valley. The homes below looked smaller now, like toys. Their roofs shimmered under the moonlight, rows of false perfection. I thought about the families inside, children sleeping, parents praying the judge wouldn't throw them out. It wasn't their fault. They'd trusted the wrong people. Part of me wished I could tell them I didn't hate them, that I didn't plan to burn their world down, just to reclaim what was mine. But justice doesn't take feelings into account. It takes facts. The day of the final hearing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back row. HOA members sat stiffly, whispering among themselves. The developers' lawyers were there too, this time, with fewer smiles and more sweat. Rachel stood beside me, calm as ever. "You ready?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Let's finish it." Bradley, the opposing counsel, began with desperation masked as confidence. "Your Honor, my clients have acted in good faith. They developed a thriving community, provided housing, improved local infrastructure. To strip them of this property now would cause irreversible harm to hundreds of families." Rachel rose before he could finish. "Your Honor, the harm began the day they stole this land. The law doesn't protect thieves just because their theft was profitable." The judge held up a hand. "Enough." He turned toward the clerk. "Please read the findings." The clerk began listing each piece of evidence, one by one. The original deed. The false authorization. The forged signatures. The testimony from the surveyor. The whistleblower statement. Each word hammered another nail into the coffin of Cedar Valley's defense. When it was done, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked up. It is the ruling of this court that the property known as Cedar Valley Estates was wrongfully appropriated. Legal ownership is hereby restored to Michael Harlow, as the sole rightful heir to the Harlow land grant, Parcel 51B. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. Then the gavel came down. And just like that, it was over. Outside, cameras swarmed again, voices shouting questions I couldn't even process. But I didn't answer any of them. I just walked down the courthouse steps, each footstep feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. Rachel caught up to me. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I replied. "The land did." As I reached the parking lot, the wind picked up, soft, familiar. The same sound that had once whispered through the grass before the houses came. I closed my eyes and listened. It remembered my name again. But the story wasn't done, not yet. Because taking the land back was one thing. What came next would decide what I truly stood for. Would I let 96 families lose their homes? Or would I find a way to make the ground remember their names too? The answer waited on the horizon. The morning after the verdict, I woke before dawn. For the first time in years, the valley was quiet again. No hammers, no engines, no false promises humming in the air. Only wind, carrying the faint smell of cedar and cold earth. The kind of silence my father used to call honest weather. I parked my truck at the ridge, coffee steaming in my hand, and watched the sun rise over the roofs below. 96 homes, walls and dreams standing on ground that now, legally, belonged to me again. Justice. That's what I'd been fighting for. But as the golden light spread across the valley, it didn't feel like victory. It felt heavy. Because justice, I realized, isn't always peace. By noon, my lawyer's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters wanted exclusive interviews. Developers wanted settlement negotiations. The city wanted to re-evaluate zoning boundaries. And the homeowners, well, they wanted answers. A delegation of them came to see me that afternoon. 3 men, 2 women. You could see the exhaustion in their faces, the uncertainty in their eyes. The one who stepped forward, a man about my age, in a worn denim jacket, spoke quietly. "Mr. Harlow," he said, "we just want to know, what happens to us now?" I studied them. They weren't the ones who forged signatures or buried paperwork. They were teachers, nurses, families trying to live quietly in the dream they'd been sold. "I don't blame you," I said finally. "You bought what you thought was yours. The people who cheated us both are the ones I went after." The woman beside him asked, "Will we have to leave?" That question hit harder than I expected. My father's voice echoed again, "The land doesn't lie." "No," I said. "Not if I can help it." Their shoulders loosened, a collective breath released. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the boundary lines again, flashlight in hand, tracing the fences and markers that had defined my fight for 2 years. The air was cool, the stars bright, and every inch of ground beneath my boots carried stories, of my family, of their families now too. That's when I understood something my father never had to face. Owning land isn't just about keeping it. It's about stewarding it. 2 weeks later, I called a community meeting at the Cedar Valley Clubhouse, the same hall where HOA board members used to lecture homeowners about lawn lengths and mailbox colors. Now, those same chairs were filled with anxious faces. No one knew what to expect. I stood in front of them, papers in hand. "My name's Michael Harlow," I began. "And as of last month, this land, all of it, legally belongs to me again." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I raised a hand. "But that doesn't mean I'm here to evict anyone. What was taken from me was heritage. What was taken from you was trust. So, here's what I propose." I placed the documents on the table. Every homeowner who bought in good faith will receive a long-term ground lease, 50 years, renewable, at a symbolic fee of $1 a year. You'll own your homes, I'll retain the land title. The HOA will be dissolved permanently. No more board meetings, no more forced compliance. Cedar Valley will become a self-governed community, not ruled, but respected. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a single clap broke the silence. Another followed. Within seconds, the room filled with applause, then tears. It wasn't the roar of victory, it was relief. I smiled faintly. But understand this, I added. The land doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to people who treat it right. From this day on, you take care of it, and it'll take care of you. After the meeting, families came to shake my hand. Some cried. A few apologized, even though they had nothing to apologize for. The man in the denim jacket, his name was Tom, said, "You could have taken everything. Why didn't you?" I looked past him, through the window, at the hills that rolled into the horizon. "Because winning isn't the same as destroying," I said. "My father taught me to fight for what's mine. Maybe it's time I teach my son to share what's ours." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You've got a good heart, Mr. Harlow." I chuckled. "Nah, just good land." Over the next months, Cedar Valley began to change, quietly, naturally. The signs that once read HOA regulations enforced came down. The clubhouse turned into a community center. The pool that had been locked behind codes was opened for everyone. People started planting gardens where the old HOA used to ban them. Kids played in the park without being told to stay off the grass. The neighborhood, once polished but soulless, began to breathe again. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd walk the edge of the valley and see porch lights flickering through the trees, families laughing, barbecue smoke rising into the dusk. It wasn't just my land anymore. It was alive. One afternoon, a reporter from a local paper came by for an interview. She was young, curious, the kind of journalist who still believed stories could change people. "Mr. Harlow," she asked, "after everything, the court battles, the stress, the money, was it worth it?" I thought for a long moment. "It was never about being right," I said. "It was about remembering who we are when someone tries to erase us." She smiled softly. "And what will you do now?" I looked out toward the valley. "Build something honest," I said. "Maybe not homes, maybe memories." She wrote that down. The next morning, the headline read, "Man who beat the HOA gives land back to the people." Years later, the story became local legend. Law students studied it as a landmark property rights case. Developers used it as a warning. But in Cedar Valley, it was simpler than that. Every spring, the community held a small festival called Harlow Day. No speeches, no politics. Just families gathering under the big oak near Miller's Creek, kids painting signs that read "This land remembers us." And I'd stand at the edge, coffee in hand, smiling quietly as the wind moved through the trees, whispering the same sound my father once heard. The land remembered my name. But now, it remembered theirs too. Epilogue, the quiet victory. In the end, I didn't win by taking anything back. I won by giving it forward. Because land, real land, doesn't belong to the loudest, richest, or most powerful. It belongs to those who listen when it speaks. And when Cedar Valley sleeps at night, beneath the same stars my father once watched, I know the earth finally rests easy, not because it's mine again, but because it's finally home again.